like to call this meeting of the Waterford Town Board to order on November 13th, Wednesday, 6:00 p.m. Hi, everybody hear me? So we're here this evening to provide the town residents with information matters in the police department over the past 6 or 7 months. To try to provide the town with as much as possible, we've compiled questions that we have through email and from those in the community. We'll do our best to answer those questions this evening. To be clear, there's still some matters that the town cannot discuss to avoid placing the town and taxpayers in a position of liability. But we will provide information when and where we can. Specifically, the town cannot address the specifics of the investigation related to Mr. Nelson, as there is a pending injunction he has sought following a public records request that was made for some of the investigation file. Until we know what the court will or not permit to be released, the town is refraining from disclosing information unilaterally in relation to that matter. This is not a meeting to degrade our police department. We have many fine officers who have been working very hard. I've been in there to see many of them, give them gift cards to buy food, tell them if they need rest to let us know, telling them to take the vacation that they very well need. Rather, this is just to give information. And although sometimes things are hard to hear, it's the unfortunate reality of some of the things that we've been dealing with for the past 6 months. So I will start up. We're just going to start up with some kind of a summary, and then we've got some questions that we will go into. And actually, this summary might answer some of these questions that we have received. We'll start in the beginning. We had a chief. We've been without a chief since January. In the past, the previous chief had a retirement date of March, and very shortly before moved it up to January. So we were kind of in a situation where it was a few months earlier than we expected. So we can move that up. At that time, or even before that, some of this began last summer when I became concerned about maybe possible liability issues with, policing, say, outside vendors, spankies, things like that. I had concerns about using town equipment. So we started conversations about that. So a lot of this kind of started way back then. We had someone who came forward to me, to the board, who had concerns about an investigation that was done, or investigation, that was still being done. They weren't quite sure. With one of our officers, and they had never received an answer. So I had begun to try to find out if there was a report on this investigation, if the investigation was ever closed, what the status was with that. During that time, the chief had retired, and I was getting nowhere in my questioning. This case was investigated by Big Bend. I had made numerous calls to the Big Bend Police Department, not numerous. My clerks had made some calls to the Big Bend Police Department. We were getting nowhere. So while we were working on that, other things had come up. We did receive a letter that said that case was closed and that officer had gone to training. But though we still never received the report, and we still never got to see that report, or I had no idea when it was closed or what the specifics were on that. Sometime in February, I'm guessing February, we had appointed a lieutenant in charge because we needed somebody in charge. The town board at that time followed policy, followed protocol, put the second in command as a lieutenant in charge. And at that time, we had no open investigations that the town was aware of, or any information that way that the town was aware of when he was put in that position. Early that same year, the officer came to me about another issue that they were having. It looked like some kind of retaliation case or something that Racine County was working on. At that time, I reached out to Racine County. They were still working on an investigation. So I really didn't have information regarding that yet. I had asked them for the report when it was finished. I did receive a report on that at the end of March. And in April, I received an email from this PD employee asking me to investigate. And on May 6th, we had some suspensions and we started some investigation. I'm gonna skip the whole part about, let you talk about anything about Lieutenant Nelson. Just so everybody understands and is aware, it's really hard to try to give a chronological order of everything that happened because there was so much stuff just happening all at the same time, okay? It was not fun walking in the door there every single day, getting hit with something else that was going on. None of this was any evil plan. None of this was pre-planned. None of this was anything to get rid of officers. This is situations that we were faced with that we dealt with. We had questions saying, why did you start investigations? Because we had allegations and we had employees asking us to start investigations. If we had not started investigations, I'm assuming people would be upset with us for not starting investigations when we should have. The town has been doing its job. Around the same time, we had a, I'll let you, we had a meeting, I believe it was May 2nd. We had to do some suspensions. And we did have a meeting where we decided, how we were going to do this because we had no chief. We would have no top officers. So we needed to make some decisions about how we were going to keep this together. And in the meantime, you want to take it from there?
So we had the allegations against each of the lieutenants made by separate complainants about separate issues. We already didn't have the chief for retirement. We needed to have some level of command structure. So the town board held a meeting on May 2nd and at that time appointed the chairwoman as the point of contact to reach out to the sheriff's department to see what assistance they could provide us in a supervisory capacity within the town police department. They over the course of the conversations, they agreed to provide the lieutenant, who has been doing an excellent job in this office since he first came on. We needed to have that in place before we place the lieutenants on their administrative leave because we needed to make sure we had continuity of command. And so then I believe it was on May 6th that the lieutenants were placed on administrative leave with the sheriff's department ready to take on the task of providing that supervision that we needed.
Thank you. We also, the day after that, held a meeting with the officers that were still here with the sheriff's department, sat them all down, let them know what was going on, let them know that the sheriff's department was here in a supervisory capacity, filled them in on how things were going to go. We did that 2 days in a row. For people who missed it the first day, not everyone's here every day. We had some part-time employees. We did that 2 days in a row. And actually, the sheriff's department was here for quite some time too, because they were doing body cam training, things like that. So they were here, we were back and forth. We had some meetings with them, making sure that they understood everything that was happening. I mean, we had no idea how long this would last. We didn't know if it was a month. We didn't know if we did. We had no idea. So at that time, we did sign an agreement with the sheriff's department through the end of the year that can be canceled at any time. So if we only needed it for a month, we could have used it for a month and then canceled it. They are still here. They are doing a great job helping us out, and we're very grateful because there's no way we could have handled a lot of this stuff with ourselves. In the meantime, as the investigations were going on, we did have some unfortunate behavior from some of the police officers not all. I want to make that very clear. Some of the police officers, one of them was involving a critical incident. I'm sure all of you remember at the end of July, an elderly woman from our area wandered off and was lost, and the temperature was like 97 degrees that day. It was very hot. You guys remember, very critical incident. And we did have a part-time officer who just decided that he was going to leave the command center because he just didn't want to be there anymore. And of course, the supervisor said, you can't do that. That's not how this works. It's all hands on deck. This is a critical incident. And there was some not so nice words being said. And there was some disciplinary action because of that. As a result of that, that part-time officer decided to resign. I want you to understand that a critical incident like that, it took them like 2 or 3 days to find her. I remember the command station being set up at the park. And then I worked with the school to get it set up at Washington Caldwell School because it was so hot and they had equipment that they needed to use. They had everybody there, right? Fire departments, municipalities from all over the place. And I heard from one of our other officers that what happened that day was quite an embarrassment for PD. Just so you have an understanding, that's one of these situations that can happen. Some other situations that we were made aware of were a call that was called in from somebody who was actually being physically assaulted from a road rage incident. And the call went unanswered. I believe I was told for about 8 minutes. After looking and investigating, Racing Sheriff ended up taking that call. After looking into it, we did find out that our officer was sleeping. Not just sleeping, but sleeping in a known sleeping zone, one of their favorite sleeping spots, which we have found out. So you can understand how we were feeling finding out some of this stuff. This is not stuff that you want to know. This is not stuff that you want to think really goes on. And I hate to be the one to tell you, but this is the reality, okay? So obviously there have been some disciplinary actions. Want to keep going with some of them? We've got, and we can go, I'll keep going with the policies. We have department policies. These policies are not created by the town board. They are police department policies. We don't create them, they're their policies. The officers need to sign off on these policies. They need to read them. They need to acknowledge them. If they have questions, they need to go to the supervisor. No one ever came to the supervisor with questions, yet we had a whole bunch that we looked in July that when Lieutenant Jeske sent out a directive in March and said by March 31st, everyone needs to have all of the policies acknowledged and signed off. In July, we had a list of people who had not done that. So we sent out an email and I said, hey, until August 9th, they gave at least a couple weeks, please read through, understand these policies take like 5 minutes to read through, okay? Read through these policies. If you're part-time, we pay you 2 hours to read through these policies, take like 5 minutes a piece. So please read through them, please acknowledge them, please sign off by August 9th. We had a couple that still did it. So just to show you how we got to August 9th, we made follow-up emails. Please remember to acknowledge your policies, sign up on your policies, sorry. The afternoon of August 9th, hey, it's 3 o'clock. Please sign off on these policies. If you have any questions, let us know. They even got a phone call from Lieutenant Spiegel and actually a phone call from me, reminding them, please follow up on these policies. We need to get this done. We had one part-time officer in particular who is extremely rude. And yes, I will use the word sophomore because that is actually what it was. Not just to me, but to Lieutenant Spiegel. Extremely rude, saying that he didn't agree with the policy. I explained, you've had months and months. If you had an issue with the policy, you should please come to us. At this time, you need to just read it and acknowledge that you read it. This needs to be done. He was incredibly rude. He said, fine, he'd sign off on it. He still didn't sign off on it. He got another email from another supervisor the next day. Let me just go. He had 6 reminders to please sign off on this policy. He finally did, but then he said, well, you know, he was disciplined for not following, you know, directives. And even after that, even after he signed off, he said, well, I'm not sure if I want to. So we were put in limbo. Is he going to come to work? Is he not going to come to work? It's issues like that that we're dealing with. And I want to explain again, these are not policies that the town board created. These aren't silly, weird policies. These are typical department policies that people have been signing off for years. Okay, this is the kind of behavior that we've been dealing with. So when people talk about resignations and people being kicked out or pushed out, these are the incidents that happen that lead up to these resignations. Do you want to talk about office?
Sure. So as the investigations were going on, interviews were being conducted, and there have been numerous reminders to the employees that the individuals under investigation were not to be permitted access to non-public areas of this building. Even the morning of one of the interviews, additional reminders were sent, both I believe by email as well as verbally, that when the individual arrived, he was not to be permitted access to the non-public areas. One of our town employees opened the door and provided access to the individual who was specifically prohibited from being given access to that area. As a result of that, the employee was placed on administrative leave pending a discussion by the board as to how to proceed following that. The employee was given numerous opportunities via letter, as well as a supervisor going to their home to invite them to come and discuss with us the events of that day, eventually resulting in a letter sent that, should the opportunity not be taken to come and talk to us, that we would consider that to be a resignation through job abandonment, which ultimately is what happened. To this day, the employee has not taken the opportunity to discuss the
Infraction.
The infraction, the total disregard for the instruction to not allow the individual into the office. The reason why that's such a big deal is that there are documents and whatnot that are stored in there that has the potential to interfere with the investigations that are ongoing, which is why they were not to be permitted access to these non-public areas to begin with. So it's unfortunate that we continue to have to deal with these sorts of behavioral issues. But we deal with them as they come up. We certainly aren't looking for them. We don't need any more, but we handle them as they come.
Thank you. And I just want to make an extra comment that allowing someone in wasn't just, you know, that person was directed, and that person was directed at least 2 more times right before, do not let this person in. And it was a very willful, intentional, a very willful act, very insubordinate act. And again, we've yet to hear from that person. We went above and beyond trying to reach out, and this is just where we are. So recently, I'm not on many of these Facebook pages because frankly, I just don't have the time for the nonsense, but I do hear when some people send me things, and recently there was something posted saying yet another officer resigned this weekend. None of us knew anything about anybody resigning. I searched through my emails, didn't see anything. Called Bob, he didn't know anything. Talked to Lieutenant, he didn't know anything. Clerks didn't know anything. So, you know, I understand First Amendment rights, and I understand people's rights to go on social media and say whatever they want to say. But I also caution people to, you know, maybe stay in your own lane. If people at the town board and if people at the town of Waterford or the PD have no idea of a person resigning, it's probably really something that should be posted by a citizen on social media. We weren't even aware of that until Monday when we got into the office and I received a letter that was mailed. It wasn't really an officer, it wasn't a patrol officer. It was someone who just worked on our policies for us. It was very amicable. It's a very amicable letter, followed up by an extremely amicable text message. Someone that I've worked with in the past on other things, Marcy's Law and victims' rights and things like that, very amicable. So I think the pot stirring kind of needs to stop because it's kind of silly and foolish and sophomore actually. Besides the investigations and other issues, some of the other issues that we had to deal with, again, just people not wanting to follow policy. We've talked about an issue that we found out in the midst of all this, when we were trying to hire some officers, that we had no FTO program. And in fact, many or not all of our officers had never been FTO trained for our department, and that is a problem. We had a meeting with them, and I think there are some of them who thought that that wasn't a problem, but it is. And it puts us at a great risk, and it's a great liability. We had lunch with our insurance agent, and it is a great liability. So we did have an issue with that. We did talk about needing an FTO program, needing an FTO manual. I'm getting started on training. So it's kind of hard to hire people when we have no training in place to train them. And we have many people here who aren't even trained, who are already working. We've had people refusing to follow policy. We've had people sleeping. We've talked about that. We had a weapon that was put into an unlocked drawer. I mean, not following proper protocol. Okay, we've had officers placing themselves on calls that weren't even ours and taking themselves right back off to up the call volume. Right. We've had complaints from residents of no follow through on complaints and people saying I should have just never bothered, or I should have just gone to the sheriff's department. Again, this is not all the officers, but these are some of the things that we have had to deal with, and we wanted to give you a taste of some of the things that have been going on in part and parcel for. There's a lot of open records requests, which is great. Understand if things take a while. We, especially our clerks and Bob and I, have been so incredibly insanely busy. Plus there's just an election, plus there's another election. Please have some patience and give them some time. Again, this is not to disparage the police department, but this is just to give you a taste of the things that have been happening so you can understand. Nothing has been, you know, I've heard things out there, they're just trying to destroy the department to get the sheriff in there. If we wanted to get the sheriff in here, all we would have to do is say, let's have a meeting and let's take a look, right? Let's compare apples to apples. What does everyone think? That certainly would have been a hell of a lot easier than what we have all been through this last 8 months. I just want to make that extremely clear. Okay, we do have some questions. Did you want to start?
Sure.
Questions?
First question we have is, why was David Berger not offered an opportunity to retire from the police department? I believe Officer Berger is well below the state of Wisconsin's required age for retirement. Additionally, if this is referencing any other officers who did retire, that was their own volition. There was no offer of retirement made. That was their choice to retire at that time. Next question says, where does the progress on the field training manual stand? Has this hindered the progress of part-time patrol hiring and current officers assisting? There still is no field training manual. One of the officers was working on something. What was provided to me does not have any sort of syllabus of training in it. It was more of a policies and procedures manual which is pretty much the state law and the policies on Lexipol that the officers have. Has this hindered the progress of part-time patrol hiring? In some respects it has, because before we can hire, we need to have the ability to train the officers once they are hired. But there are also other factors that are hindering the hiring. I don't know if it's hindering current officers from assisting, other than none of our officers have been through a local town of Waterford field training program. Is the chief of police position currently posted on Wisconsin Law Enforcement Net or anywhere else for open applications? It is not. Last month, a motion was made and acted on to post that position because of all of the extra office work that has been happening. You would not believe the volumes of paperwork involved in these open records requests. It's huge, it's time consuming, and then you throw on the regular daily activities that our clerks are expected to manage, in addition to the workload that they have picked up as a result of staffing issues in the police department. They are extremely overworked. I believe they are the unsung heroes of this town, and I think we need to cut them quite a lot of slack. It is the intent that at the appropriate time that the posting is made. I believe personally, not speaking for the board at all, that at this juncture, it would be appropriate to hire the chief before hiring additional officers and let them hire the department that they would like to have. Is it true the board is not looking for assistance from the town of Waterford Police Department members to look over the applications or assist in the hiring process? That is true. I don't know, typically a human resources type board or individual would look at applications, not colleagues. So I'm not sure what that's getting at. Based on the investigation process, when will the chief's position be posted as motioned and passed in October? I think I addressed that one. Who will review the applications for the chief position? So when we previously posted the chief position and we were going down the process of that prior to the lieutenants being placed on administrative leave, a panel of retired chiefs was being set up to review applications and interview to narrow down the field of applicants before a smaller pool was brought to the board to determine the final hiring decision. With the lieutenants placed on administrative leave, because they were applicants for the chief position, we are required to give them the opportunity for promotion, and so we had to put that process on hold, and it has been on hold ever since. Who will review the applications for the open officers positions? I believe that would be the chief.
Chiefs Association group.
What are the qualifications of the person people reviewing and deciding upon the qualifications of the applicants? Well, ideally, that would be the chief. Once we have a chief in place, if we were to go about this without having a chief in place, ultimately the hiring and firing decisions come down to this board. So what our qualifications are as town board supervisors would be the ones making the final determination as to the hiring. Next question asks, were the investigations related to Lieutenant John Nelson and Lieutenant Bill Jeske criminal or administrative in nature? The investigations were administrative.
Is it true that former Chief Matt Johnson was not interviewed on the allegations brought forth on both lieutenants, and if not, why? Matt Johnson was not interviewed because in fact he refused to respond to numerous calls, voicemails, and other attempts made by the investigators to contact and speak with him. Is it true May 7th town board meeting minutes or agenda did not mention the approval of the Racine County Sheriff contract and why. Actually, it was May 2nd. It was a closed meeting. And at that meeting, the motion made by Supervisor Solinsky that was passed was to give the chair the authority to be the point of contact and to carry out all the actions talked about in closed session. That was one of the actions that we talked about because we did not want to leave the PD open. We needed to get somebody in the right away. We acted swiftly. We acted appropriately, and we got someone in here who has jurisdiction, training, experience, and we got that done right away. So there would be no, no gap in public safety. That's what we decided to do for our town residents, and we did the right thing. Were any interviews conducted in the search for Waterford chief? No, we didn't get that far. Is it a fact that the internal investigations being conducted by CSS also employed Sean Marsky, who is a town of Waterford employee? Is that a conflict of interest? No. Sean Marsky had nothing to do with the investigations. He's a full-time chief elsewhere. He's a part-time employee with the town solely for the purpose of assisting with the development of the lexical policies for the police department. He has not performed much, if any, work for the town over the past year or so. He has served as a consultant for CSS, but he has not worked for CSS for over a year either. Additionally, the CSS immediately walled Sean off from all files and information he may have otherwise had access to ensure Sean remained outside of the loop. Is it true that CSS investigation team did not complete the whole investigation on Lieutenant Nelson? Lieutenant Nelson retired prior to the completion of the investigation, which prevented the investigation from concluding because, among other reasons, the town lost its ability to compel him to answer questions post-retirement. Why were many officers not interviewed by CSS during these investigations? The investigation included interviews of more than 10 officers. The investigation was thorough and only sought to include interviews of those individuals who might have relevant information to provide. The investigation was not a witch hunt, so they only interviewed people who were relevant. The type of outcome would be contrary to the taxpayers' interest and the interest of those under investigations who would have fair process. You keep saying, maybe it's me, you keep saying that none of the officers applying are qualified. Who is making that decision and what qualifies you to make it? When an application comes in, the clerks first take it. What they do is a basic background check. They do a very basic background check, and they check the red flag list. So you can take it from there. Next page.
If the board was aware the chief was resigning in fall of 2023, why has the process taken so long? How far did the board get in the process? Well, as was mentioned, the chief initially told us he was retiring in the spring, and then on short notice moved that up to the first week of January. And the process has taken so long for the reasons previously mentioned as well. State law has made it difficult because we had to give the lieutenants a fair shot at the promotional opportunity as well. The board got to the point where we were scheduling rooms to conduct the interviews in when all of this fell apart, and we had to put the entire process on hold. When did Terry Nicolai and or the board receive information dictating that the town could receive services from the county at $400,000? I don't believe the county has ever told us that we could get service from them for the total of $400,000.
That would be great.
What dictates the appropriate level of discipline when an internal investigation occurs, and who determines the level of discipline? For discipline up to the level of suspension, that would typically be the police chief. The officer would have the opportunity to appeal to the town board if they thought that was an inappropriate disciplinary measure. For any motions or terminations, that is left up to the town board to make the decision. But the board also has the ability to delegate that authority to a hearing officer. The level of discipline is dictated by the conduct that is found to have occurred, as well as other factors such as record of service, for example, other disciplinary measures that have taken place. If the employee has been here a long time with little to no discipline, then they might receive a lesser punishment for the infraction. If they have been a problematic officer, well, then each occurrence will escalate the level of discipline. If it's a severe enough infraction, then it could start off at the highest level, which is termination. One example of that would be untruthfulness, which requires termination even at large departments like the Milwaukee Police Department. They have said that officers on the Brady list are unemployable by them. As a small department, we have similar issues of needing to have officers that can follow through prosecuting cases to the final conclusion. So if that becomes an issue, we have to look at termination. Other issues that can require significant discipline are insubordination, harassment, discrimination. If you have several lesser types of infractions, they can compound, and that can also lead to a higher level of discipline. How did Officer Berger come to be placed on the Racine County District Attorney's Brady list? Each district attorney makes their own determination. If an officer is to be placed on the Brady list, that is their sole determination. They maintain that list. That is not our determination to make. Why were investigations handled by CSS, Kenosha PD, and Racine County Sheriff's Office, sometimes involving the same case, or was the board simply not finding what they wanted to find? We had 4 different investigations that occurred between May and October of this year. 3 of them were handled by CSS. 1 was handled by Kenosha PD initially. They focused on a criminal element. And then the Racine County Sheriff's Office focused on the administrative piece. And the Sheriff's Office handled the 4th investigation as well. So there wasn't really simultaneous investigation of any of these cases by multiple jurisdictions at the time.
Why are some of the part-time officers not allowed to go on road or be utilized more, especially given the lack of officers currently on duty? Have you interviewed current officers to know what their training actually is? Have you offered them further opportunities if required training is fulfilled? Why or why not? So first we'll start with part-time officers being utilized. The part-time officers that we do have on our roster, we're thinking about making a minimum requirement that they have to at least work for us so many hours, especially now that we do need them. There are some that have left. There are some that just have other jobs and they just aren't working. We have been working with the supervisor to try to get those on the roster to actually work. And if they're not going to work, maybe they shouldn't be on the roster. We've been trying to get them to work because we do need to give the officers that are working a break. Have you interviewed current officers to know what their training actually is? Well, we have everybody's training in their file. So if somebody has anything that they need to tell, they can follow the chain of command and tell their supervisor, and we can go from there. Have you offered further opportunities for training? Well, not right now. We're just trying to get through. Again, we don't even have an FTO program right now. So I'm not quite sure what that question is. What kind and how often of communication does the board have with the PD? We've had as much as possible. Again, they have Lieutenant Spiegel, the chain of command that they can go through. If they can't get a hold of him or have an issue with him, they have Bob, who's their liaison, and they have me. Bob is here a lot of the times. I live here. So, I mean, if anybody ever needs me, they know where I am. I'm always there. I can't read people's minds and think, oh, I think this officer might need something today, and walk into the PD to see if somebody needs something. They know how to get a hold of us. We've been very accessible. Everybody knows that. I've been in there giving people, the people who are there, McDonald's gift cards to get something to eat, to see how they're doing, see if they've got enough rest. I mean, we're doing as much as humanly possible. So if someone has an issue or a concern, a question, they absolutely know where to find us and they absolutely can get a hold of us at any time. We had one more question. I think that was,
It was, why is the sheriff's department investigating the Kenosha Art Table?
so Kenosha did a criminal piece and then there was a policy piece that needed to be looked at. So unlike anything else that you might want to be reading from other people, that is not true. So the Kenosha did a criminal piece and Racine County did their piece. And we will be doing a hearing. That officer asked for a hearing and that will be scheduled in the near future. So that's that. I just want to make this very, I want to thank Ryan. I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to add. We did have Ryan here just to explain. I know I did have another question that I heard. There were two more that I remember that I heard from people who asked. Number one is, why bother doing investigations if they don't turn up anything? Well, investigations are made to find the truth, not to find guilt, right? You do an investigation to find the truth. There's an allegation, you do your job, you do the investigation. However it turns out, it turns out. I did have somebody ask how much this is costing. We can get the numbers, we can get back to that person. Again, money that we didn't want to spend. But if we didn't, we wouldn't be doing our job. And we would be sued from the people who wanted us to do our job. So I just really want to collectively, I want to publicly, number one, say thank you to Tina and Heather for all of their extra time and attention and detail with the slew of things that we've been dealing with. Thank you so much again. Thank you to Bob for pretty much being with me and beside me through the hell. We've stood up the gates of hell. This has not been fun for the last 7 months. And thank you to Ryan for your help and your expertise and your legal advice. And I know sometimes people have been mad at us because we haven't said what they wanted to know, but we are following his advice because we are protecting you. We are doing our job. So if anybody has any questions after this, you can please email me, you can email Bob, we'll answer them to the best of our ability. We really appreciate the officers that we have there doing their job day after day. We appreciate you showing up to find out what's going on in the community. And we ask you to be proactive in the community. And please, if you have questions, ask us instead of reading social media. You might want to ask us, that'll be great. And we'll give you as much information as we can when we can. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much, everybody, and good night. Motion to adjourn?